Johnny, that's better than most.
How about in?
That is better than most. Better than most!
You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio with Dalton Ballphaser.
Oh, wow! In your life have you seen anything like that?
Good morning, people of Earth and golf fans everywhere. You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. This is episode 28. Got a lot of good stuff coming up in the show for you today. Recapping the end of the FedEx Cup with the BMW Championship and how Marc Leishman continued his strong play this season. And the Tour Championship and how a rookie overcame the 29 other best players of the 2016-2017 season. How the season's best player ultimately claimed the FedEx Cup. As well as a recap of the President's Cup, the every other year edition of the Ryder Cup. Not as intense, but definitely gets the blood pumping. Pinseeking, the good and the bad of the last couple of weeks in the game of golf, as well as an interview with an associate editor at the Golf Channel and a friend of the podcast, Nick Menta. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Bump and Run Golf Podcast on WHIP Radio, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. It's now time to take a stroll on the links to find out what's happening in the game of golf. And the BMW Championship at Conway Farms, the third leg of the FedEx Cup on the PGA Tour as the season is rapidly closing. And from the get-go, Marc Leishman seized control of this tournament. He opened with a 62 in round 1, 9 under par, 62, and would hold a two-shot lead over the likes of Jason Day, Charlie Hoffman, Jamie Lovemark at 64. He'd be challenged by Rickie Fowler, who shot 65-64 in his opening rounds, getting off to a really good start. Patrick Cantlay shot 67-65 to open his tournament campaign. Cantlay's been having a really quiet, good year. He's been going through a lot of troubles at home with his swing as well. So he's really bouncing back well, and he's been playing really well. Was in contention at the Valspar Championship this year. He had a chance to win, but was unable to pull through. And Leishman backed up that 62 with a 64. He took commanding hold of the lead with a couple of chasers, but it was all Marc Leishman the whole weekend. He'd back it up in the third round with a 68, and then on Sunday he'd shoot a 67 to finish at 23 under par, setting a new tournament record at the BMW Championship. Conway Farms is a course that sets up for a lot of birdies for these guys. Great course conditions, and these guys make enough birdies to separate themselves, and Marc Leishman did just that. Leishman made 6 bogeys and made 29 birdies. Just a spectacular performance from the Aussie who won the Arnold Palmer Invitational this year. He has a ton of game, and it shows here in this victory at the BMW Championship. The guy plays so well. He's a great driver of the golf ball. He's a very good iron player, and his putting has really picked up as of late. And when you're rolling the rock well, it's very easy to make tons of birdies. Now Marc Leishman, 16th in the world, has a couple of wins, and he was a runner-up at the 2015 Open Championship at St. Andrews, ultimately won by Zach Johnson. But Marc Leishman has tons of game, and it's hard to find guys on the tour that are so good in everything. Leishman's a great driver. He's a great iron player. He's a great wedge player. And he's an improving putter, and that's hard to find. You see a lot of guys with a flaw here and there, but Marc Leishman's a very solid player, and moving forward, you expect that guy to win a major because he definitely has the capability, and he definitely has the talent to get it done. Justin Rose shot 66-65 in the weekend to get himself a second-place finish. Rickie Fowler tied for second as well, shooting rounds of 70 and 67 on the weekend after his torrid start, and Jason Day gets the top 4 finish at 16 under par. Following and right behind is Matt Kuchar and Jon Rahm. So the big guns were coming out. The top 70 made the BMW Championship, and then it was cut to 30 for the Tour Championship. But Marc Leishman wins the BMW Championship. A tournament record of 23 under par. Marc Leishman gets the job done at Conway Farms. The final stop of the year for the PGA Tour in its tournament season. A lot of big storylines coming in. Justin Thomas looking to win the Tour Championship and the FedEx Cup, like the last few winners have done. Rory McIlroy did it. Jordan Spieth did it. Billy Horschel did it. Henrik Stenson did it. So a lot of guys have been claiming the double by winning the Tour Championship and the FedEx Cup, which has allowed for all the money to go to them, the $10 million plus the extra money from the Tour Championship and the bonuses for making the FedEx Cup finale. Lots of money at stake this week at the Tour Championship. Kyle Stanley wanted a lot of that money. He opens up with a 64 to give himself a 2-shot lead over Paul Casey, Brooks Koepka, Webb Simpson, Daniel Berger, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth right behind at 67. Kyle Stanley would ultimately fade into a tie for 20th to finish out the tournament with rounds of 73, 70, and 73. That's not going to get it done after that opening 64. But the guy after 3 rounds was Paul Casey, 66, 67, 65. And Paul Casey is an interesting lad. Great ball striker, great iron player, just a very good all-around player, just like Marc Leishman. But Paul Casey's been doing it for a much longer time. The thing about Paul Casey, though, is he hasn't won on the PGA Tour since 2009, and he hasn't won on the European Tour since 2014. It's been a while since Paul Casey's won a golf tournament, and we always wonder why hasn't he won a golf tournament. I'll get into that a little bit more in Pinseeking, but Paul Casey coming into Sunday had a good chance to win the Tour Championship and maybe win the FedEx Cup, but he ultimately fades with a final round of 3 over par 73, which is not getting it done any day of the week. But this leaderboard was stacked. Brooks Koepka, Daniel Berger, Justin Thomas. After a 67-66 start, he really fought in his third round to shoot a round of even par 70. He didn't get off to the greatest of starts. He shot 1 over on the front, and then he doubled the 14th hole after birdieing the 10th to get him to 2 over par, but he somehow grinded to get birdies on 16 and 18 to get in at even par, and that was a really great salvage of his round after that double bogey in the middle of his round. Jordan Spieth making moves as well. He wasn't really in contention for the tournament at all this week. He was there, but he really wasn't in contention, but he was just trying to keep making birdies to try to keep his FedEx Cup hopes alive to win the whole thing. Kevin Kisner was up at the top with Paul Casey as well after a 68, 68, 64 start. And he even took in Georgia, Mississippi State, the former Georgia Bulldog in college. After his round on Saturday, he took a private helicopter to the game, supported his Bulldogs, and was ultimately back on Sunday. But heard some funny stories that he was pushing his playing competitor along because he wanted him to pick up the pace so he could get to the game on time, which is pretty funny. But ultimately on Sunday, Kisner would fade. He shot even par, but that's not going to get it done on a championship Sunday. As I said, Paul Casey shot 73. So who was coming from behind? Russell Henley shoots 65. Xander Schauffle was making a move after 69, 66, 65. Looking for his second win of the season as a rookie. On the PGA Tour, he won the Greenbrier Classic a couple of weeks after the U.S. Open. And the guy's got game, top 5 at the U.S. Open. And he's been a very solid player throughout the year, and he hits it a long way when he keeps it in the fairway. And on Sunday, Justin Thomas was making a move. He's making a lot of birdies early. He would come in with a final round of 66. And Schauffle would battle, especially being in the situation that he was in, considering a lot of pressure, a lot of money's at stake. He really had an outside chance to win the FedEx Cup, but he still put forth his best effort after an even par 35 on the front 9 in the final round. And then he backed it up with a birdie on 13, and then he came down the 18th needing a birdie to win. And after blistering a drive down there to the end of the fairway on the 18th, a par 5 at Eastlake, he had a mid-iron in, and he hit a beautiful golf shot to just the front of the green. And 2 putts would get him the victory from off the green, and his first putt rolls out about 2.5, 3 feet away, and he has a decently breaking right to left putt to claim the Tour Championship, and he rams this, and it catches the left edge and spins and rolls all the way around the cup and goes in, and he shakes his head in disbelief and just starts laughing. But he is ultimately the Tour champion. Kevin Kisner, Paul Casey had a chance on the 18th, but they would have had to make albatrosses a 2 on a par 5, so they weren't able to do that. And Xander Schauffle claims the Tour Championship for his second win of the season. Easily should be the PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, no doubt about it. No other rookie has 2 wins, and he's played so well throughout the season with that top 5 in the U.S. Open as well. Give this guy the Rookie of the Year. He more than deserves it. Something interesting that comes out of this is the whole idea of the Tour Championship winner not being the FedEx Cup winner. And it's a little awkward to me, and the reason for that is Justin Thomas wins the FedEx Cup. He won 5 times on the year, including 1 major, shot 59, among other things. And he's obviously going to overshadow Schauffle, who had a really great performance and won the FedEx Cup. The PGA Tour, I'm sure they've heard options, and I've read other proposals, but I just don't think that having the Tour Championship winner and the FedEx Cup winner be different is an okay thing. They make it work, but I think it could ultimately be better if one guy takes it all. It's been like that the last few years. It just happened this year that Schauffle comes out from middle of the pack, of these 30 and wins the Tour Championship. But nevertheless, Schauffle wins the Tour Championship. Justin Thomas wins the FedEx Cup. And what a year for Thomas. 5 wins. He won the CIMB Classic, the Tournament of Champions, the Sony Open, the Dell Technologies Championship, and the PGA Championship. And the funny thing about it was he wrote down a list of goals on his phone before the season, and I'm going to go through those and tell you which ones he got and which ones he didn't. Make the Tour Championship. He did that. Win at least once. He did that. He won 5 times. Be in the final 2 groups of a major on Sunday. He did that. U.S. Open and the PGA Championship. He won the major. Make the President's Cup, which he did. Plus .25 or better in strokes gained putting. He did that with .29. Above 1 strokes gained tee to green. He did that at 1.3. Top 10 in all-around stats. He did that. He was 6th. He was under par on par 4s and par 5s, but he just missed the par 3s by .04. He was not top 30 in scrambling, and he was not top 10 in half his start, but he just missed that by 1, and he had an under 70 scoring average. So out of his 12goals that had multiple parts, he only missed 2.1 of them, say. And those are pretty lofty goals, and he accomplished all of them. He had a heck of a year, and he's going to be a superstar in this tour, no doubt. So Justin Thomas, the winner of the FedEx Cup, and Xander Schauffle, the winner of the Tour Championship, wraps up this 2016-2017 season. What a year it was. Another one coming down to the wire, but they start right back up in a couple of weeks on the PGA Tour for the 2017-2018 season, so it's all year round for these guys. They keep it going all the time. The official end of the 2016-2017 PGA Tour season comes at the President's Cup at Liberty National Golf Club, where the international team and the United States team battle it out for world supremacy in the every other year form of the Ryder Cup. And the United States has been dominating the President's Cups over the last 5 editions, winning all of them. The internationals have not won since 1998 at Royal Melbourne Golf Club, and the United States have won the other editions outside of the 2003 edition that was tied. But this one was no different from the get-go. The United States team gets out jumping early. Day 1, Thursday foursomes, Justin Thomas and Ricky Fowler win 6-4 over Schwartzel and Hideki Matsuyama. Matt Kuchar and Dustin Johnson win 1-up over Johnny Vegas and Adam Scott. Patrick Reed, Jordan Spieth win 5-4 over Emiliano Grillo and Siwoo Kim. And Brandon Grace, Louis Oosthuizen defeat Daniel Berger, Brooks Koepka 3-1. And Marc Leishman, Jason Day, Phil Mickelson, Kevin Kisner halved. So after Thursday's foursomes, the U.S. was up 3.5 to 1.5. In Friday four-ball, the U.S. won 4 matches out of the 5, and Patrick Reed and Jordan Spieth halved against Adam Hadwin and Hideki Matsuyama. So the U.S. had an 8-2 lead after 2 days of the President's Cup, well in hand for them, but not over quite just yet. Saturday morning foursomes, the U.S. wins 3 of the 4 matches, with Ricky Fowler and Justin Thomas having Brandon Grace and Louis Oosthuizen, but Spieth and Reed, Kuchar and Johnson, Kisner and Mickelson all won their matches. Third day, the U.S. was up 14.5 to 3.5 after wins by Spieth and Reed, Thomas and Berger, Johnson, Kim in a very close match coming down the stretch, but the U.S. has an 11-point lead. All they need is 1 point to win the President's Cup. And after 3 days, it's really surprising to see this as big of a deficit that has major champions in Louis Oosthuizen and Jason Day. They have a lot of talent. I don't know what's different about it for the Europeans when they play in the Ryder Cup. I don't know if it's not really that important to these international guys. Liberty National is a fantastic host, a lot of great golf holes in Manhattan there. Steve Stricker used the pod system that Paul Azinger made famous back in the '08 Ryder Cup at Valhalla that got the U.S. a first Ryder Cup in a number of years. It's got guys like Tiger Woods, Davis Love, Jim Furyk, Fred Couples helping him out as assistant captains. And it doesn't hurt when you have guys of that caliber helping you out trying to win this President's Cup. And you have a loaded roster like Thomas and Spieth and Reed and Koepka and Dustin Johnson and Charlie Hoffman, Kevin Chappell, Ricky Fowler. You have so many guys that are accomplished on this level. And they're just taking it to the international team right now, and we'll see how much they can beat them by after Sunday singles. In singles, the international team really kind of turned it around a little bit. They got 6 wins out of the 12 matches, and they halved 3 of them. So they ended up getting 7.5 points on their card on Sunday. And the United States team got 3 wins from Daniel Berger, Phil Mickelson, and Ricky Fowler, and got halves from Kisner, Dustin Johnson, and Kevin Chappell, ultimately ending up a 19-11 United States victory. This U.S. team, loaded with talent, loaded with guys that have proven themselves on the PGA Tour, and when you have a veteran like Phil Mickelson in his mid-40s contributing as well, that's a big part of it. Another win for the United States in the President's Cup. It's been like that for 20 plus years. The internationals, it seems to me, don't really have a desire. They don't really have any passion like the United States team does. And I think it just comes from a matter of the history of the event. They haven't really been winning. They haven't really been close to winning. And with the U.S., you continue to bring a lot of talent, and these guys are just so well-rounded and so good. And the United States in Ryder Cups and in President's Cups is going to be good for such a long time. But Europe just brings another test for the United States. You have so many established veterans: McIlroy, Rose, Keimer, Lee Westwood, Sergio, Thomas Peters. You have so many guys on the European side that are experienced and have great talent. The international team has a lot of talent as well, but they just don't seem to put it together at the President's Cup. But we'll see at the next edition coming up in a couple of years. But a 19-11 victory for the United States in the President's Cup at Liberty National Golf Club for, once again, another victory in the President's Cup. Next up, Pinseeking.
Be the right club. Be the right club today.
It's now time for the best thing in the game of golf over the past couple of weeks. The Temple Owls, as I am here down at Temple, get their first tournament win as a team for the season at the Cornell Invitational at Robert Trent Jones's golf course at Cornell. John Barone claims runner-up honors, finishing one shot back of the lead with a 3-day total of 3 under par after rounds of 70, 70, and 70. Rookie Dawson Anders, who won the Junior Boys Championship in the Golf Association of Philadelphia over Brian Iswan, finished tied for 7th at even par. Marty McGuckin, who played as an individual, finished tied for 10th at 1 over par. Gary McCabe Jr. finished tied for 30th at 8 over par. And Trey Wren and Sam Soth finished at 9 over par for the tournament, a tie for 33rd. And this Temple team has loads of talent. You have a Junior Boys Championship winner in Dawson Anders. You have a Chrisman Cup winner in the Golf Association of Philadelphia in Marty McGuckin. You have John Barone, who was a staple among the gap this year, winning, qualifying for majors, and putting forth good efforts in those. Gary McCabe playing in those majors as well. Then you have Sam Soth, who made it to the quarterfinals of the BMW Amateur Championship, the most prestigious amateur championship in this region for sure. So this team has loads of talent. The last couple of years, they won the City 6 Invitational last year at Huntington Valley. They've had talent with Brandon Matthews, who's now competing on the PGA Latino America Tour. Matt Teasdale, the assistant coach, a very strong player, and Brian Quinn molds his players very well, their head coach. Have a lot of talent. We'll see what they can do throughout the rest of the year, but a good victory for the Owls and a good way to start their season in their first tournament of the fall. Why do people throw their golf clubs? Why does it take 5 hours to play around? It's now time for my most frustrating things in golf. And it's simple to me. This time it's not an ad or it's not something stupid that I saw on the internet in the golfing world. It's Paul Casey. And it's a shame to see because he's such a good player. But he struggles mightily in the final rounds of tournaments. As I said earlier in the show, Tour Championship, he has a great chance to win. And he goes out and shoots a 3 over par 73, which isn't going to get it done. I don't really know what it is for Paul Casey. I don't know if he just doesn't have it on Sundays, if there's something not right there. But he's been elite, but I'm not really sure. This season, well, this past season now, he's tied for 80th with a 70.45 stroke average in the final rounds. 80th. That's not getting it done for you. You got to be able to shoot under par in final rounds to sustain your spot in the leaderboard or even move up a spot or two if you have to. His only PGA Tour win, the 2009 Shell Houston Open. His last win was the KLM Open in 2014 on the European Tour. He does have 13 European Tour wins. He also has the most top 5s without a win than anybody else on the PGA Tour. Paul Casey is such an elite player in this game. And he went from really good. He took a turn for the worse like Henrik Stenson did for a while. Then he's returned to prominent form. But Paul Casey is such a good player. It's really questioning and really confusing as to why he struggles on Sundays. You would think a veteran like himself wouldn't feel the pressure on Sundays because he's played so much tournament golf. It's just like any other day for him. But apparently he feels it, and he hasn't been able to capitalize in a couple of years. And he made the transition a couple of years ago to really focus his efforts on playing the PGA Tour full-time. Whether that was a good decision or not, I'm not sure. But he's still an elite player. He's such a good ball striker and driver of the golf ball. He's going to get his win eventually. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's another couple of years down the line because he gets in contention so much, but isn't able to close on Sundays. You see guys like Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, they're closers On Sunday, they have the lead. It's theirs. No one's coming to get it because they're so powerful and they can go out and make tons of birdies. Paul Casey can do the same, but it seems he really struggles keeping his round together when it is falling apart. But ultimately, Paul Casey is going to be fine. There is no doubt about that. But it's interesting to look at why he has struggled on Sundays throughout his career. Maybe the European Tour was a comfort zone for him. He's maybe not quite comfortable over here yet in playing this type of golf. But who knows? Paul Casey will be back. But don't be surprised if it takes him a couple years to get his latest victory on the PGA Tour. Next up, my interview with an associate editor at the Golf Channel and friend of the podcast, Nick Menta. Now joining me on the hotline is an associate editor for Golf Channel and a friend of the podcast, and that is Nick Menta. Nick, thanks for joining me, and how are you?
Always good to be a friend of the pod. Doing well, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you joining me for a few minutes. Nick, 2016-2017 season on the PGA Tour was a quite interesting one. A youth movement once again, with basically 18 guys under 24 years of age winning a tournament on the PGA Tour. Only 17 players did that from 2003 to 2011, so it's really showing a youth movement on the tour. What ultimately do you look back on this season, and what do you ultimately think about?
Maybe the most important thing that's now gotten overlooked, considering what a year Justin Thomas had, is that Jordan Spieth is now one major championship victory away from the career Grand Slam. And I think it sort of speaks to what he's already accomplished in a short amount of time on tour, but also how much when we look back this will be remembered of the year of Justin Thomas. I think in any other scenario you would have looked and said Dustin Johnson won 4 times, right? Jordan Spieth won 3 times, captured the third leg of the career Grand Slam. At one point yesterday afternoon, it looked as though he was going to be, just the second man in history to win his second FedEx Cup. So you had a number of things happen. Phil Mickelson split up with his caddy. Rory McIlroy suffered through injury. Jason Day's been through a slump. There were no shortage of through lines all year, but when we look back at the end of this year, it really was the year that belonged to Justin Thomas in the way that he sort of overshadowed everybody. So there might be more important things we look back on, like Spieth picking up the third leg of the career Grand Slam, but Thomas wins his first major. He shoots 59. He shoots 63 at a U.S. Open. 5 wins, Player of the Year, the FedEx Cup. There's no doubt that 2017 really uniquely belonged to him.
I would assume by your statement there, you think he should be the Player of the Year, no questions asked?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think even had Spieth somehow found a way to steal the FedEx Cup from him or win the Tour Championship, I still think Thomas would have had a compelling enough case to win. But now that he's the lone guy with 5 victories, he has a major championship, he has the FedEx Cup, like I mentioned, 59 and 63. It's a walk. I mean, there's not even a debate.
And the winner of the Tour Championship, Xander Schauffle, has had a pretty good rookie year as well. He'll probably win the Rookie of the Year. He won at the Greenbrier, and then he ultimately wins the season-ending Tour Championship among the 30 best golfers throughout the 2016-2017 season. What are your thoughts on Schauffle and how he was able to kind of withhold pressure from Justin Thomas and Kevin Kisner among many Tour vets?
Yeah, it's been sort of a meteoric rise for that guy. I wrote on golfchannel.com this morning that it hasn't been so much a breakout rookie season for Schauffle as it's been more of like a breakout 4 months. I mean, the guy ties for 5th at the U.S. Open, but prior to that, he was a rookie who was 135th, I think, in FedEx Cup points. So, he had gotten off to an unremarkable start. Ties for 5th at the U.S. Open. 3 weeks later, he wins at the Greenbrier, like you mentioned, and then he shows up at the Tour Championship, and he doesn't look like, much like all of these kids who are 25 and younger who appear ahead of their years. He was certainly anxiety-stricken over that last putt that almost didn't go in, but for the rest of that back 9, that guy was pouring in every big par putt he needed to make. So he's got an impressive game. If he's a little more accurate off the tee, he's probably going to start challenging for maybe being the best driver on tour, considering just how far he hits the ball. He's very much like Justin Thomas or even Rory McIlroy as a small guy who hits the ball a shockingly long way. He's got a lot of game. He's sort of a fringe member of that class of 2011 that we all like to talk about, but he never had near the accolades of Thomas or Spieth or Daniel Berger or any of those other guys, Emiliano Grillo, but he's got a lot of game. So, like I said, nobody saw this coming 6 months ago, but it's the last 4 months for Xander Schauffle. It's certainly been impressive.
And getting back to the Tour Championship, this year, unlike many other years, the winner of the Tour Championship did not win the FedEx Cup. I'm just curious your thoughts on the whole idea of this kind of awkward finish to the season, especially if you have a guy like Justin Thomas winning the FedEx Cup but not winning the Tour Championship. Do you think it's a little awkward because one guy's more than likely going to get overshadowed by the other?
Yeah, it's a little convoluted just trying to follow it on Sunday, and not to be too much of a company man here, but I do think Hicks and Miller on the broadcast do a pretty good job of trying to make everybody aware of exactly what's going on in terms of how the points are shaking out for the FedEx Cup while other guys are competing just to win the Tour Championship. So, yeah, it is a little messy. It is a little convoluted. I've looked at other proposals or seen other proposals for and not that anything the Tour is seriously considering, but just people were like, hey, maybe we have a winner-take-all style or one final jackpot, or maybe we play the playoffs as one long running event against par. But, as much as the FedEx Cup sort of takes some criticism, I think it's made leaps and bounds of progress over the last 11 years and turned into an event where, these guys, really do respect it and really do want to win the FedEx Cup, not just for the money, but because they see it as something prestigious and they see it as something that, sort of will leave a legacy for them on tour. It wasn't always looked at that way, but now that you have younger guys who, were in high school or playing junior golf when the FedEx Cup started, now that you have them out on tour dominating, vying for titles, that's something they want to win. So while you're right, it's a little convoluted, and they probably will keep tweaking it as the years go on. If it's a season-long race, then season-long points need to matter. Season-long performance needs to matter. So if you just throw all that out at the end to ensure that the guy who wins the Tour Championship wins the FedEx Cup, then what was the season-long race really for? So it's a delicate balancing act, and I'm confident the Tour will continue to tweak it moving forward, but I wouldn't expect any wholesale changes anytime soon.
Paul Casey, to me, is a very interesting guy, very great ball striker, very good driver of the golf ball. He's basically a great all-around player, but it seems to me like on Saturday and Sunday, he kind of fades away from the leaderboard. He's tied for 80th with a 70.45 stroke average in the final rounds of tournaments during the past season now, I guess, as we're talking here. What are your thoughts on Paul Casey? He only has one PGA Tour win, 13 European Tour wins, and that PGA Tour win came in 2009 at the Shell Houston Open. What are your thoughts on Paul Casey? Do you think it's something mental for him on Saturdays and Sundays, or do you just think it's something that's a growing pain for him right now?
Well, I mean, look, he's an elite player for, 63 holes a week. The guy has more top 5 finishes on the PGA Tour over the last 3 years than anyone else who hasn't won a golf tournament. It's actually fairly impressive. He keeps putting himself in position. It's hard to call it growing pains on the basis that this guy is a veteran. I mean, he's been out there a long time. His decision to abandon the European Tour and focus full-time on the PGA Tour 3 years ago has really led to a career resurgence. It's maybe a little crazy to say that on the basis that he hasn't won over that over that span of time, but this is a guy who was once ranked 3rd in the world, who plummeted to 169, who's now again been a fixture of the top 50 and the top 25 for the last 3 seasons since he focused on the U.S.-based schedule. He just hasn't broken through with that win. Paul Casey has a lot of talent, and he's playing some of his best golf. He just can't seem to close. To your point, I'm not sure if that's mental. I'm not quite sure what it is. Now, I think the longer these things go on for any athlete, it becomes harder to get that monkey off your back. So, every time he puts himself in position, it doesn't quite close the deal. It's got to sort of be adding maybe another layer of scar tissue up there. Yesterday really did seem like it was set up for him to finally pick up that victory that has eluded him for the last 3 years. And, there was a scenario where he probably could have walked away with the Tour Championship and the FedEx Cup had things gone his way. They didn't. And so, like I said, this guy is a borderline elite talent for 63 holes a week, but just for whatever reason, he has not been able to get it done on Sunday. He continues to play well. He continues to rack up top 5s. He just can't find the winner, sir.
I'm curious to see what you think. The majors were really good this year. You have Sergio winning the Masters, Brooks Koepka winning the U.S. Open, Jordan Spieth at the Open Championship, and then Justin Thomas winning the PGA Championship. What did you think was the best major of the season?
That's a really good question. It's difficult. It's definitely narrowed down to the Open Championship and the Masters. I think I might give the edge to Sergio just because we've been waiting almost 2 decades for it to happen. It was a terrific back nine that duel between he Justin Rose. They obviously go to a playoff, and there was an emotional sort of resonance and pathos to watching that. That said, what happened with Spieth? What happened with Spieth at the Open on the 13th hole, where he takes a half hour to play one hole, was unlike anything we've seen in golf, or certainly anything I've ever seen watching golf, where you've got one of the more convoluted rulings we've ever seen, one of the lengthier rulings we've ever seen, and for a guy to bounce back from a level of stress that I think anyone else would have caved under, to then rattle off the finish he did over the last 5 holes to win his third major, that was certainly impressive. I give the edge to Sergio just because we've sort of been on this road and on this ride with him for nearly 2 decades. But had it not been for the built-in history with Sergio, Spieth certainly would have taken that honor.
Yeah, and when you mentioned Jordan Spieth at the Open, my mom even said to me, she goes, "What is he doing?" As he's walking next to all of the equipment trailers, and I'm like, I don't know. No one really.
You're taking relief from a dune, and then you're walking back as far as you can so you can take relief from an equipment trailer, and suddenly we're in the driving range, and 20 minutes has passed since the last time the guy hit a shot. It was unlike anything anyone's ever seen. So I still give the edge to Sergio, but I don't think anybody will ever forget. Look, if there's not already a plaque on the driving range over there for Spieth, there certainly should be.
It's one of the greatest bogeys I've ever seen, that's for sure, considering how far right he hit it. But there's been so many, moments throughout the year that stand out. You talked about Spieth, you talked about Sergio. I'm just curious on the other side of things. You have guys like Jason Day, Rory McIlroy that really didn't have great years. Rory, especially to me, he's kind of a conundrum. One year he's really good, the next year he's not, and it seems he's a very streaky player as well with the putter included. I'm just curious, is there a player or someone that stands out to you that may be going on the wrong side of the things and taking a turn for the worse at this point?
It's hard to say, especially when you talk about a pair of elite talents like McIlroy and Day. I have no doubt that they will be back and playing their best golf eventually. I think Justin Thomas actually is about to find out that, while it's hard to break through and have a $20 million season like the one he just had, it can be even harder to maintain that level of success. So, yeah, Rory's gone through swoons before. He's gone through another one this year. He's gone through a lot on and off the course. He's fought that rib injury all year. He got married. He split with his caddy, so it's been an eventful year for him. He'll be back eventually playing his best golf, but he's a guy who's going through a swoon right now, much like Jason Day, as you just mentioned. The guy hasn't won since the 2016 Players. He's been injured himself. He had to fight through, he had to support his mother while she was fighting through cancer. There's been a lot going on with him and his golf game. He just went through a caddy change. So, guys go through swoons, but I think when you talk about 2 guys who are as gifted as Day and McIlroy, we will see their best golf again. Much further down the trough, if you're looking for someone who's absolutely going the wrong way, keep your eye on the Web.com Tour Finals this weekend as they wrap up. Hunter Mahan is a guy who used to be, we were talking about the Tour Championship, he used to be a staple of the FedEx Cup playoffs. He used to be Mr. Eastlake. He never missed it for a period of time during the FedEx Cup era, but now he is outside the finals 25, heading into the final event of the Web.com Tour Finals. He might not have PGA Tour status next year, and that's shocking for a guy who was, once as successful as he was. So look, any of these guys can fall apart in pretty short order. It's hard to predict these things, but they do happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hunter Mahan's a great point. He was very successful. I think he was the only person to make the Tour Championship in every single year from when the FedEx Cup started, if I remember that correctly. But there's so many guys that do fall. But those Web.com Tour Finals are a great battle because guys are fighting for their jobs, and it's great television, and it's great to watch them compete. One more question here for you, Nick, and I appreciate your time. Phil Mickelson, Jim Bones Mackay, they separated this year for the first time of 25 years being together. Now Bones is down with the Golf Channel. He does great work analyzing golfers. Now he has the best, he has the experience from being with Phil for 25 years. Do you think there was a reason behind the switch, and what ultimately do you think is causing players to break up with their long-term caddies?
Right, so Rory leaves JP, Day leaves Swadden, who's still a swing coach. Phil and Bones break up after a marriage of 25 years.
Yeah.
Is there anything to it? Is there anything in the water? Not particularly. Look, guys are always looking to not blame something, but occasionally you need to shake things up, right? If you're not playing your best golf, you need to to maybe try something that you're not already trying. For Phil and Bones, look, it's hard to think of a more, well, I don't know if successful is the word, but it's hard to think of maybe a more iconic caddy player duo than the two of them. And even just as a fan of golf, it's disappointing not to have the two of them together anymore. Phil's had Tim Mickelson, his brother, on the bag for the remainder of this year. I don't believe that's a permanent solution. And he's made pardon the pun, I guess, he's made no bones about it, that that's probably not a permanent solution, that he'll need to look for somebody next year. We haven't gotten any indication as to who that might be. So, look, Phil's 47 years old now. He's unclear what kind of schedule he's going to adopt in the next 5-10 years, whether he continues to grind it out on the PGA Tour, whether he adopts some limited Champions Tour status. I guess we'll see what happens with Phil. But, it was 25 years, and while it's fair to be disappointed that they're no longer together, most guys never make it that long. So, we'll have the memories.
Nick, thanks for talking with me as always. Always enjoy chatting with you about golf, and thanks again for joining me, and talk to you down the road. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dalton. Thank you.
That's going to do it for the Bump and Run Golf Podcast, episode 28 in the books. I'd like to thank you all out there for listening. I'd like to thank Nick Menta for joining me once again. Great insight on the PGA Tour and what this season was really like. It was a really good season. A lot of great storylines, a lot of young guys really dominating the tour and showing how much the tour has gone to a youth revolution. And guys like Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Xander Schauffle, John Rahm. There's so many guys out there that have such talent on the tour, and they're well under 24 or 25 years old. So the PGA Tour is in good shape for quite a long time. Once again, I'd like to thank Nick Menta, Associate Editor at Golf Channel, for joining me. Always fun having him on the show. And until next time, my golf friends, for...